Welcome, Blood Brothers and Sanguine Sisters, to Deeply Discussing Dexter, Season 1, Episode 6, Return to Sender. This is a pretty great episode. It really mostly follows just two storylines all the way through. We have Aster's birthday party going on, and the Return to Sender bit, which is the crime scene that Dexter thought he had gotten rid of in the last episode, comes back to haunt him. So I really enjoyed this one. What did you guys think of the episode overall?
My favorite so far. This is what I want Dexter to be. The tension, the suspense, the creepy factor. Less relationship stuff, more of the meat and bones of the gory, creepy stuff. I was all about this episode.
Yeah, I found this episode to be pretty titillating. It definitely, gives you a bit more suspense. There's the stakes are much higher. It was a fun episode. I really enjoyed it in terms of where we've come so far in season 1.
This episode was the very first one that actually felt like Dexter was actually at risk. And so I thought this added a lot to the show, and I was extremely pleased with it.
Yeah, I was as well. The Rita storyline, or the Aster's birthday party storyline, which is half of the episode, is essentially about them dealing with the return of Paul, the kids in particular dealing with it, and Dexter and Rita trying to figure out what to do. That starts with Dexter and Cody flushing a goldfish, and basically it turns out that Rita asked Dexter to come over super early that day, even before he usually comes over for breakfast, to help Cody deal with the dead goldfish. And I just think that's hilarious that Rita just couldn't stomach flushing a goldfish. She had to get Dexter to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of mom duties, she's not really living up to what she could, her full potential with mom duties, I mean.
Yeah. And she knows Dexter can handle it. He's all about it. Takes a couple of flushes, which is true to life. Goldfish carcasses don't always go down the first time. They like to float.
I did not know that it was that difficult. This is another educational episode for me.
And is it a bit foreshadowing? Like he's trying to get rid of a body in the water and it just won't go away.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that is actually something that they wrote in that way for that reason. And then Aster's picking out a cake for her party. Later, they're talking more about the party, and that's when Paul calls Rita, and she tells the kids to leave the room. So we don't really see any of that conversation. We just know that they're having it. But Rita calls Dexter about it, and she's worried that Paul will crash Aster's birthday party. So let's talk about Paul a little bit. What you guys think about his introduction into the show?
Does he actually make an introduction in this one, or do you just hear him over the phone? I can't remember.
We just hear about him.
Yeah. So you don't get much from this one outside of the fact that Cody is clearly pro Paul, and Aster is old enough to realize that Paul's a bad guy.
Well, he's been gone long enough that Cody doesn't really remember the bad stuff that he did, and Aster was directly involved because apparently she got in between Paul and Rita at one point and got hit by Paul.
Yeah, we don't so much see who Paul is or learn who Paul is, but we learn more about his effect on the kids than we've ever really seen before, and see the depth of what his actions have done to them. Like you said, Cody, he was so little, he didn't really know, but he's got this fantasy idea of what having a dad is, whereas Aster is pretty damaged by it all.
Yeah, and then there's Dexter's reaction to it, which is he's worrying what the kids will remember about him once he's been caught, and then he thinks about what Rita will think, and that her ex is a crackhead and her boyfriend's a serial killer. It's kind of hard not to take that personally.
That was actually one of my favorite lines of this episode.
Later, Rita is hanging a sign for Astor's party. The kids come home, and Astor's upset because Cody blabbed to everybody at school that his dad was coming to the party, and so all of Astor's friends' parents have banned them from going. So her party's pretty much ruined. And that leads to a scene where Astor wakes up in the middle of the night. She's wet her bed. Rita's helping her out, and she asks Rita if she can cancel the birthday party. So Astor is clearly very worried about her father showing up at this birthday party, and I think it goes beyond just the effect that it's having on her being able to invite her friends over.
Yeah, that's a bummer for just like the whole situation for so many reasons. I mean, you've got the history that comes with it, the baggage that comes with it, the new boyfriend being Dexter, Cody's emotional response as opposed to Astor's response, as opposed to the mom's response. It's like there's so much happening. All the emotions are just building up to this one party. I don't even know how old she is. Like, does that ever mention how old she actually is?
I don't think they mention it.
Yeah, so it's so funny how funny but also awful how complex all of this stuff is for a child, because granted this is a television show, but this does happen to children in real life, and they are affected by it in lots of different ways, but it could eventually drive Astor to do or be a certain way or do certain things based upon the way that their biological father has been sort of terrorizing her childhood,
As somebody who went through something similar, I thought the writers really did right by this storyline. It was pretty true to life for what it's like to be a kid through this stuff. So I thought this was a very standout portion of the episode. I thought Astor, the girl who plays Astor, did an amazing job, and Rita showing the desperation of a mother trying to figure something out to try to help her kid through this. I thought it was amazing.
I agree. I think this is one of the better tellings of any storyline in the show so far, because it does get a little more in depth into the emotional impact of the behaviors. And as you said, the girl who played Astor was amazing. Just usually I'm so irritated by child performers. That sounds so bad, but it's so rare there's a good child actor. But she was so subtle and just heartbreaking and played that disappointment and that fragility so well.
As I say, that's why they kept her on for all the seasons, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of doing the switch out like they usually do.
Well, they switched Cody. Cody changes actors after the first season. But yeah, they keep her through all of it. And I would say, this is kind of the first episode where we really see the kids doing more than just being, a just sort of prop or token characters. And it makes me sad that there aren't more storylines that revolve around Astor or Cody than there are. There's maybe 2 or 3 more times that Astor gets a fairly large storyline, but over 8 seasons, it hardly seems like she's got much going on. So Rita calls Paul and tries to talk him out of coming into the party, and she reminds him that there's still a restraining order in effect and that she will call his parole officer. That ends up being enough, and the birthday party is a success. Rita and Dexter are lighting candles. Rita tells Dexter that she had called all the other parents, saying that she had made sure Paul wouldn't come, and when Astor reveals her birthday wish, it was that her dad didn't show up to her party. I just like that plot line. I like that they don't introduce Paul as a actor, or they don't introduce the face of Paul in this episode. He's much more menacing as what you don't see or what they're just talking about. You don't know how much of a monster this guy really is, and it works for.
He's kind of the boogeyman for now.
Yeah, and it works for this episode because in the next episode where he does show up, he's this sort of manipulative, nice guy with a hair trigger temper, and so that characterization wouldn't have played quite as well with how upset Aster is in this episode.
And how sad that she gave up her birthday wish. Kids her age should be wishing for ponies, even though we don't know what age she is, but should be wishing for a pony, and she's just wishing that her dad doesn't come to her party. It's really a heartbreaking little scene.
Yeah, I want to say that she's probably about 10 in this. Maybe a little bit younger. I know she's a teenager by the time the series is over. But yeah, I don't think we ever get an actual read on how old she is in this episode. So then the other main plot line is the actual return to sender. Dexter's called away to a crime scene from Rita's, and it turns out to be the wife of Jorge. Her name is Valerie, who's the woman that he ended up killing at the end of the last episode. She showed up, and it turned out that she was part of the human trafficking thing with Jorge, so he ended up killing them both. He threw them both in the ocean. Her body was not chopped up the way he normally does it because he was in a hurry, so he threw her entire body overboard, and it shows up in the Airstream where he committed the crime. So Dexter thinks it has to be the ice truck killer who must have been watching him and had gone out and dove into the ocean to get the body. And this is where we see, like Aaron was saying before, for the first time, Dexter is pretty freaked out and worried. He's pretty sure that this is going to be the end of the run for him.
Yeah, it's like the cat and mouse situation, but the cat is able to swim. I don't know why that makes any sense, but
but somehow it does. I totally get what you're saying. Never heard that before, but it works. You just totally made that up.
No, it's like if you finally put the pressure on Dexter, which is an interesting way to see him as a character because he's so in control and has such a purpose, and then to finally see him frazzled. Just the look of like shock when he enters the trailer, and he's just like taken out of it, almost like he's in a dream, which is we get some dream sequences later, which is really cool. And it's such a interesting twist for our the protagonist, who's really like an anti-hero.
And the way this scene was shot was amazing. If I can just shout out the way the scene was filmed, I thought it was so good. Especially it zoomed in really a tight shot of Dex kind of looming over Masuka, and they're just in this really claustrophobic spot. It was just perfect. Perfect scene.
There's a lot of good cinematography in this episode. There's a lot of shots where the framing is pretty close, but it changes focus from something right up front to something that's a little bit further in the midground and then further back, and the whole movement tells a story of, there's Dexter's face going to the body, going to Masuka, the way all of those things are revealed, and it's a really well done section. Doak says this tin can smells like gas, Morgan. The sooner you get busy, the sooner we can figure who did this. Nobody jumps on the fact that he says, well, we can finger someone, which is like Masuka's.
Anybody other than Dokes would have murdered Masuka.
But Dexter says to himself, he's getting back at me for not killing the security guard, Tucci. Masuka says that he doubts that the person was killed in the Airstream unless the murderer was some kind of genius. So Dexter's like, well, thanks, but I'm still very worried about this kind of thing. And then Masuka sees the needle mark from the N99, but Dexter tries to convince him it's a bug bite. Then Deb, Dokes, and LaGuerta search the barn and find the signs of human trafficking. They find the child in the trunk. Yeah, he's the one who saw Dexter in the last episode. And then Dexter sees that happening from the Airstream and says, the noose is tightening. This is how it ends, in the hands of a 7-year-old. Then there's a flashback where Deb is trying to talk Harry into letting her come along on a hunting trip with Dexter, and Harry says, keeping the truth from the people closest to you is how you survive and how you protect them if something goes wrong. So that's all the first chunk of the crime scene that the ice truck killer has put in place to stir up Dexter.
Yeah, he's got a lot of thinking to do, that's for sure. I think the writing definitely starting to speak for itself, and this kind of does go to that point where we, the kind of us discussing this is like, was this always a bad show? Well, this episode to me doesn't seem like it's a bad show episode. Like this episode seems to me like you're already immersed into this world of like, eat or be eaten in terms of like serial killerness, but then like there's so many sides of it where there's other sides too, like the police detective stuff, the LaGuardia stuff, obviously we already talked about the Rita stuff, but her family stuff. There's like so many different angles where they're spinning a lot of plates and they're doing a really good job with it.
Yeah, I think when the show is doing bad, it is generally the fault of the script. It's generally the script letting the show down. In this case, there's nothing wrong with this script, and so it is a great episode all the way through. You have an Aster storyline, which we don't get enough of, in my opinion, and so that's really good to see. And then we have this Dexter actually sweating the consequences of things that we don't very often see. And so there's a lot of tension all the way through the episode. There is a little bit of comic relief that comes in that's also well done. So, I don't have any complaints with the writing on this particular episode of the show. So later, Angel explains the coyote extortion scam to Deb and Dokes. He has one of the refugees that escaped because of Dexter. She tells them that Jorge's wife was in on the scam. Asuka finds the M99 in the body and he shows it to Dexter. He's all proud that he figured that out. And it turns out that Dexter has been getting the M99 through an alias, but he doesn't think it will hold up. Dokes sends the police looking for Jorge's boat. Angel tells Dexter the kid in the trunk is working with a sketch artist, which is another thing that is making him nervous. He's sure the kid has seen him. Deb and Dokes are searching Jorge's house. Deb floats the idea to Dokes that the killer tried to copycat the ice truck killer. Dokes is avoiding phone calls for some reason. We'll find out later. And then Dexter returns to the crime scene to see what the kid's vantage point was from inside the car and concludes that, yes, he would have seen Dexter inject the wife in the neck. So he would have seen that kill for sure, and he would have seen him open the door.
Yeah, was the copycat killer thing because she saw the cuts in the neck, like he was trying to do what I guess, were those cuts made by Dexter in the neck?
Yes.
Okay, but then he said he didn't have enough time, and so that's why he didn't finish the job, which is why she was whole. And so then I guess Deb then looks at those cuts and thinks, oh, well, this person tried to do what the ice truck killer did but couldn't accomplish it, so that makes him a copycat. I mean, this is like I don't know, it's one of those things that I feel like detectives might do in a situation like this to sort of place blame somewhere,
Yeah, they think that it's... I'm pretty sure they think that it's just a copycat because the body isn't sectioned into pieces, it wasn't frozen, and all that kind of stuff. And Dexter throws that back at her and says, like the blood was drained, but it was done super quick. Like this person was in a hurry, and the ice truck killer is never in a hurry. So this might be somebody that thinks they're doing the ice truck killer method, but they don't have all the information. Dexter has a trippy nightmare that includes a rain of blood and then Psycho Deb, which is Deb dressed in her hooker garb in an almost doll-like makeup style, killing Dexter the same way he kills. So he's on the table and she cuts his cheek and stabs him and he wakes up. He comments that he never has bad dreams, that he always sleeps like a baby, so something's obviously getting to him. He's obviously worried that they're catching up to him. He removes his name from the DEA list in Masuka's email, and his alias is Dr. Patrick Bateman, which is the name of the killer in the American Psycho.
Which everybody knows, so they would have instantly pulled that name up as suspicious, let's be honest.
Yeah. Deb shows Dexter a profile she's done, which is unknowingly a profile of Dexter, and he belittles her and says that she's created a cliche of a profile. He just continues to describe himself, but he's saying it in such a way that it sounds like he's saying, he's a white male, single, early, in his 30s or whatever.
I didn't get the feeling that he was belittling her. It was more like he's like, it's pretty textbook. I don't want you to get laughed at or anything. Don't show it to him. He
did it under the pretense of trying to save her from embarrassing herself yet again, when in reality he's of course protecting himself. But she did feel belittled, that's for sure.
But she takes everything as a slight, so...
Right. Yeah, it's not like she's it's not hard to hurt her feelings.
So she stands up to him and says she'll use it anyway, and throws back the line, "Way to have my back," which is a total Deb line. Then there's a flashback where Deb is caught firing a gun by Harry and Dexter. She was trying to prove that she was good enough to go along with them on their hunting trips. The witness from the trunk is brought to Miami Metro to do a sketch. LaGuerta, who herself was a refugee, has made a connection with the kid and is able to get him to settle down and try to talk to the sketch artist. Dokes asks Deb if she has any ideas, and she starts to share the profile that she made. Dexter attempts to slink out of the briefing, and just as the witness kid is being led by him, by LaGuerta, and thankfully the kid is just like head down to the ground and doesn't look up and look at him, because he's sure that the kid will ID him as the killer. The kid won't let LaGuerta out of his sight, and they end up bringing him a pastry to try and get him to settle down some more. And that leads into LaGuerta and working with the sketch artist and kind of deciding that she may want to adopt this kid, which is kind of a funny idea. She ends up asking Deb what the process was like when Harry adopted Dexter. She's worried about the kid, and Deb asks why LaGuerta has it in for her, and LaGuerta says, "Well, you're loud, you're impulsive, and you constantly question authority." And she starts to ask Deb a question about her theory, but it turns out that Deb's already left and the door closes. So I think that's an interesting thing where those two characters finally just admit what their motives are or what their problem is with one another. And it's an interesting thing too where Deb's trying to help her get a hair out of her contact. Like, she's just trying to be nice, and LaGuerta is still being bitchy about it.
It's another scene where Deb can't handle any kind of criticism. She asked for it and then got mad and walked out, basically.
Yep.
This was another storyline that really tried to humanize LaGuerta towards us and make us forget about the weird flirting that she had with Dexter those first few episodes.
I'll never forget.
Hashtag never forget.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else, I'm sure people caught this, but there was some funky music playing whenever LaGuerta and the little boy were, like, I get that they were trying to go, like, Lifetime special with it, but it just seemed too romantic. Like, it was over-romanticized, and it threw me. That was probably my one complaint with this episode. Everything else was really great. That music, whenever they were on screen together, threw me out of it, and I was like, this is weird.
That's such a common problem I'm finding with the show, is sometimes the music is really good, or it's just so ill-timed for the scene. This doesn't work, and that is another example where I think sometimes music supervision is great, and it's like, nope.
Yeah, I feel like they had... They especially through this first season, well, I mean, actually, through the whole show, they don't have enough original musical cues, enough original music themes that they've written for the show. This one actually introduces us to the third theme that the show has, and these three themes tend to be the most used, which is the Dexter opening credits theme, which is every episode and sometimes in the episode also. Then there's the blood theme, which is the most overused one of all. They play that like 4 times an episode by the end.
That's the
Yep.
right, like, yeah, okay.
That's the blood theme. And then there's a song called Astor's Birthday Party that I'm sure they wrote just for this episode, just for that party. And it does in fact play over Astor's Birthday Party. But then it gets used like all the time. And it's really funny, like watching a scene and going, hey, it's Astor's Birthday Party music. And it's Deb on a date with somebody or some other silliness going on. So we'll have to use the...
That's one of the show's biggest flaws.
We'll have to use the Astor's Birthday Party theme as our outro on this episode.
Yeah.
Nice.
Dexter also shows up. The witness is asleep and trapped on La Huerta, and he sees that they've only done the eyes so far of the sketch, but he's worried because they do kind of look like his eyes. Dexter decides to get rid of all of his tools and evidence against him, throws it into packages, throws them into the ocean, and then he lingers on the box of blood slides, goes through several, flashing back to each one's last words. When he gets to Valerie's slide, the woman whose body showed up at the beginning of the episode, he sees that the ice truck killer carved a smiley face into the drop. And then Dexter realizes that this is just a game to him. He's not trying to get him captured. So he plants blood and fingerprints to frame Jorge for Valerie's murder. And then he basically hints that they may not have found everything at the salvage yard, pointing them back toward this knife that he planted there with fingerprints and blood.
Can I just ask or say, or I don't know how I want to phrase this, but when he plants that evidence, the evidence bag is torn open. How easy is it for these police officers, these detectives, these forensics people to get into this evidence situation and just be planting evidence all day long? I mean, it's like,
Well, there's
what's the protocol there?
There's 2 pieces of evidence that he uses. There's something that they have already in custody that he claims took a long time to process. It's like a piece of clothing that has blood on it.
Right.
It has the wife's blood on it. The knife he planted completely outside of police custody. So that's totally clean. And then he just kind of hints that maybe they didn't search the salvage yard completely. And then they go back and end up finding this knife.
Yeah. I think, it's like he's very, very sly about all of this, but it's just, to me, like, it just makes me wonder, based upon the fiction of this show, is it possible that we have detectives or forensics people that are able to, like, just get a hold of evidence and are just like, whatever, because I've been watching a lot of television shows that are like criminal docuseries right now, and a lot of it's based on one thing or another about how the person is charged with which crime, and like it just goes to show you like how flawed this show goes to show you how flawed the process can be, because just because somebody has their hands on something doesn't mean that they're not going to be planting something or not being able to be bought off by someone who's planting something, or I don't know. It just seems like it's a messy world,
Well, he creates the knife completely. He that's a whole fiction that he creates. So he says that he went to Jorge's boat and transferred prints from the boat onto the knife. And then he uses the blood slide with Valerie's blood on it to put the evidence of the blood onto the knife as well.
Right.
So he invents that knife completely and then sets it in the salvage yard for them to find. So it's not like he broke into the evidence locker and tampered with a knife that they had already found. He created this piece of evidence.
But what about was it a sock, I think, that he was using for the evidence? Like, you'd think there'd be some kind of checks and balances when somebody's checking out evidence, or him saying, yeah, we've been working on this for a while. Nobody else knew you were. So I kind of agree. It's a little bit scary to think about how easy somebody would just go, you know what, I'm just going to go in and grab this bag and throw some blood on it.
Well, I mean, and the whole lab is just Dexter and Masuka, right? So it
Right.
have to be one of them to find it, and of the two, Dexter's the more reliable as far as everybody's concerned. Like, I don't think people would want to go to Masuka and ask him if he found, like, bodily fluids on something.
Well, yeah, because then he'd just give you a one-liner.
You'd think there'd have to be right. You'd think there'd have to be a check-in process, like signing out, which there probably is in real life. But you go to the evidence locker and sign it out, and it goes through a few different people. Whereas Dexter's like, I'm just gonna grab this sock and throw some stuff on there.
Deb's profile, she ran it against the ice truck killer, and it generated 11 new suspects. There's a flashback that Deb is grounded because Dexter revealed that she was shooting off the guns. Deb gets mad and tells Dexter she wishes Harry never brought him home, and then immediately apologizes. And Dexter gives her the soup can she was shooting at and says, "You're a better shot than me anyway." That's a funny little conversation between their younger versions, where Deb is instantly regretting saying something that might have hurt Dexter's feelings. Dexter, of course, has no feelings, and he's just like, "Well, do you want this soup can? You're a better shot than I am."
He has no idea his feelings should be hurt.
Like, well, yeah, maybe Harry shouldn't have adopted me, but I don't know. Here's a soup can.
I got you this soup can.
So then we see the uniformed cops going over the scrapyard again. They find the knife that Dexter planted. The 7-year-old witness's uncle shows up to take him home, and we get this sort of happy, sad reaction from LaGuerta where she's going to miss him, but she's glad that he has family to take him.
Well, in the same vein as Zach's issue with the evidence, I had an issue how the uncle just shows up and says, "Can I take him home?" And they're like, "Sure." You'd think there would have been a little more process involved, verifying he's a relative. No, we're just going to let you go with this guy who claims to be related.
Well, the kid's escorted into the building each time by Child Protective Services. They hand him off to LaGuerta, and then she keeps custody of him when he's there. So I'm assuming that it was CPS that found the uncle, and not that he just walked into the sketch artist's office and said, "Hey, I'll take that kid."
Well, they said he saw it on the news and showed up, right? Didn't they say something like that? He saw it on the news, yeah. So you'd still think there'd be some communication with the lead on the case before they're just letting the kid go.
Yeah.
It's my little nitpick.
That's true. But otherwise, but that gives us this great, LaGuerta tearing up, but I'm glad he'll be okay, kind of thing.
One single tear.
Yeah.
Trying to convince us that she is not a robot and has actual feelings.
Then they play this fun game with the sketch where Angel has the sketch and tells LaGuerta she needs to see it. They both look shocked when they look at it. Angel turns up at the scrapyard with it and says, shows it to Deb. She calls Dexter over, and they look at it, and it's a picture of Jesus.
Because, of course.
Collective groan on that one. The one thing on the episode. The one thing.
I actually
didn't like that.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it really. I think it's silly, but I'm like, yeah, the kid's dehydrated. It's dark at night. He's young. I mean, I don't know. Like I thought I've seen some pretty weird stuff as well, and try to describe it to people, and people are like, that sounds like Jesus, or I don't know. I didn't mind it.
Well, my favorite part is like when you actually get eyes on the sketch. The artist went back and like put in shading and everything. It looks pristine. At some point you would have thought, man, this kid's just telling me about Jesus. I'm not drawing this.
See, and I took it less as him hallucinating Jesus than more as he was very religious, and he's like, well, Jesus saved us all, is more like he was going from a place of his faith more so than that he saw Jesus. So I guess it depends kind of on the interpretation. That's why it was a little hokey for me.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Very lone minor complaint.
No, I just thought it was funny, and I agree with Zach that it would have made sense that this kid is like stuck in a trunk and dehydrated and probably hallucinating and having all kinds of problems. But the way the show handles it is Doak said, "Jesus Christ saved this kid," and Angel said, "After being on his own for that long, who's to say he didn't?" There you go.
Yeah.
Angel's such a treasure for this show. Like, everything he says, it just...
Sad bastard Angel.
He wasn't sad in this one. He was suave in this episode. He had some bounce in his step again. This was happy Batista.
This was La Passion Batista.
Great. Glad he's back.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
And the other piece of comic relief for the episode was the Doakes family reunion, where it turns out that Doakes has been ducking calls from his mom. He's supposed to go over to her house for dinner. So his plan is to take Deb along so that they have an excuse to leave, where he tells her, we're going to leave before they get cheesecake. Deb, fucking family reunion. That's what she says about it. And then Doakes' sister says that Doakes' first words were, "Got milk, motherfucker?"
Which seems right.
Yeah.
And then Doakes tries to get out, but Deb just, accepts the offered cheesecake and decides to torture him further with his mom and his sisters.
Yeah, this was...
Which I love that.
Yeah, this was fun. I think I really enjoyed this peek into Doakes' life. He definitely puts himself out there in a specific manner, how he wants people to view him. And also this, again, as the show tries to help us to, empathize with a lot of the characters or show emotion through a lot of the characters, this is that moment for Doakes, same as LaGuerta's single tear. We're like, oh my god, Doakes has a family. Oh, they're actually pretty nice women. Oh, and they give him a lot of crap, and they tease him because he's the only guy in the family. This kind of explains a lot about who he is, and I really enjoyed that.
And it was a little bit of levity in an otherwise really dark episode. We usually have a lot of funny little one-liners thrown in. There wasn't so much of that this episode because it was so heavy. So that was a good counterpoint to the dark of the episode otherwise as well.
Yeah, I agree. The director on this episode was Tony Goldwyn. He previously appeared as an actor in the movie Ghost, the Demi Moore, Patrick Swayze movie, and he directed several episodes of The L Word. On Dexter, he directed 4 episodes, 2 this season and 2 in Season 2, and he also plays a manipulative therapist in Season 1, Episode 8, which is coming up. So he's a fairly well-known actor and director. And then after his work on Dexter, he did some direction, but was mainly known as the lead actor on Scandal, playing Fitzgerald Grant. So he's the president character on Scandal.
Yeah, good for him. I feel like he did a good job directing this episode, and it kind of shows just how being involved with so much of the industry can sort of help you really take a different perspective or a different look into in directing an episodic piece of television.
The writer was Tim Schlattman, who previously wrote 1 episode and appeared uncredited in 6 episodes of Smallville. For Dexter, he wrote or co-wrote 15 episodes of the series, with 2 episodes for every season other than season 5, which he only wrote 1. And then after Dexter, he was an executive producer and writer of 3 episodes on the final season of Under the Dome, which I didn't see. I think I saw the first season of Under the Dome and pieced out on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Same. Yeah.
Never seen it.
The book is good. The television series was pretty bad.
Agreed.
So, any nominations for best line of the episode?
Got milk,
Got milk,
motherfucker.
motherfucker.
Got milk, motherfucker's good. I really liked the toss away line he said about Rita. You know, it's hard not to take this personally after two crap.
Your ex-boyfriend's a crackhead, or no, your ex-husband's a crackhead, and your boyfriend is a serial killer. It's kind of hard not to take that personally.
I love that line.
I can't forget this tin can smells like ass. When he says that to Dexter, Doak says that. There were so many good lines in this
Doak's had a lot of good lines in this one. I like that. I liked Jesus Christ saved that kid. That was a funny one too. For him to say. How about worst line of the episode?
There's a scene where Dexter's talking about his bad dream and how he doesn't have them. He mentions things don't go bump in Dexter's night. I thought that was such a terrible line, but in retrospect, it's actually kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't have a specific line. It was that music that was playing whenever LaGuardia and the little boy Oscar were on the screen together. It just was too much. It's just too much.
Yeah.
Esther's birthday party.
I honestly did not have a worse line. I really tried, but there weren't any that were just epically bad like there usually is. This was such a strong episode. I mean, probably if I had to pick something, I'd kind of go along the vein of him using Patrick Bateman as his alias, just because you got to be a little more creative than that. But
yeah. Other
than that, I have no bad lines. I thought there were a lot of good ones.
Yeah, this is a very well-written episode.
Disappointingly good.
How about performance of the episode?
Aster.
Yeah, Aster was pretty good. I think she did a great job in finally sort of a breakout the situation plotline. For me, I'm going to say that sketch of Jesus. I feel like it really was the performance because it all boiled down to Jesus, you know?
Jesus is the performance of the episode?
Yeah.
Honestly, that sketch artist went above and beyond.
Yeah, right? Like I agree with Aaron. Like, man, the shading and just like the detail. I would put that up in my house, and I'm not even Christian.
Yeah, I was going to go with Aster, but I got to go with the sketch artist now. That's That was a really strong performance.
Sorry, Aster.
We just have to. We'll use that.
It's her one chance to get the award for best.
Yeah, no, I would give it to Aster, but I will say that it does make me want to make the thumbnail icon for this episode the picture of Jesus with the word Dexter underneath it.
Yeah.
This is a picture of Dexter. So, final thoughts? Anything else you guys want to talk about with this episode?
I think overall it was nice to have a more tense episode, to feel the stakes being raised finally. So surprisingly, we didn't got a lot of ice truck killer stuff in this one, which was, I think it's always refreshing. Sometimes when you have something that's like this, it focuses on one thing and they back off of that for a hot second, and then they bring you right back to it. It's nice. I like that.
I think I said it when we opened, but just to reiterate, this is what I hoped Dexter would be. This is what I wanted the show to be. This is the kind of episode that kept me a loyal viewer when I first watched, even when it got terrible. This is the stuff that I was, I guess, holding out for more of.
Right on. Well, yeah, I'll thank you guys for helping me out with the podcast. Thank you guys for listening, out there listening to the podcast. And we will close, as promised, with Aster's birthday party. See you next time.